Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome in. It is Friday, January 15th, and I am glad to be here to preview an EPL slate, something I haven't done in quite some time. And that's mainly been because the EPL schedule has kind of sucked this season due to COVID. We're not, getting any slates where there's three or four matches kicking off at the same time. It's all of these staggered starts, and they're usually three-game slates on Saturdays. And the biggest prize pools have been usually around 35K. So it's been a bit of a bummer, to be honest. But this is one of the better slates I have seen this season for a Saturday slate in the EPL. As usual, though, it is a staggered start. We've got two games at 9, a game at 11:30, and then a game at 2. That's Central Time, by the way, so don't get confused if you're in a different time zone. But we're usually getting 3 games, so it's nice to have 4. And then the way the pricing is and the way these games set up, I think there's a ton of different ways you can go with builds, even for an optimal or cash build. So that means there's no obvious lineup, there's no obvious team to stack, at least in my opinion. And so for that reason, I think putting in a little extra work this week and going through all 4 games and figuring out the best plays from each game are going to give you more of an edge than usual. So let's go ahead and look at each of these games and talk about some of the plays at each position. So the 2 early games, we've got Brighton Leeds and Burnley West Ham. Leeds at home there against Brighton, and West Ham at home there against Burnley. And then Fulham hosts Chelsea at 11:30, and Leicester hosts Southampton at 2. That's Central Time, by the way, so don't get confused by that if you're in a different time zone, which most of you probably are. All right, let's take a quick peek at the game lines here. Leeds are only a slight favorite at plus 115. 3 total. It's the only match at a 3 total. I think this is one of the better matches for DFS purposes, and I'll get into that in a minute here. West Ham minus 120, 2.5 total. Chelsea minus 180, largest favorite on the slate, still 2.5 total. And then Leicester minus 130, another 2.5 total there. So, like I said, I think the Brighton Leeds game is going to be one of the better ones for DFS purposes, and I think that's for a few reasons. To begin, the pricing is really nice. Nobody above 7,800. Leeds are a great team for DFS purposes. They like to possess the ball a ton, regardless of their opponent. At home here against Brighton, this is definitely a match where I think Leeds will have a ton of possession and a ton of chances. So in terms of a cash or an optimal build, I definitely want at least one Leeds player, but maybe as many as 3. And then on the flip side, since Leeds play this kind of aggressive attacking style, they do leave themselves open to counterattacks, and they're extremely weak at defending set pieces. So I think that could be something to exploit here. Brighton has some really tall center backs that are good in the air, like Lewis Dunk, for example, who has 2 goals already this season. So I think overall this match is one where I expect Leeds to have more possession, more chances, but I also expect Brighton to get a goal, or maybe even 2, whether that's on the counter or on a set piece. In terms of how these guys are going to line up for Leeds, it's pretty much a standard lineup that we've seen all season, except Calvin Phillips is out in the center there. That should help Rafinha. It's one less person to take away corners from him. He's generally been the primary set piece taker for them the last few weeks. Cleek or Harrison could take as well, but the primary guy is going to be Rafinha. 7,800 at the forward position is a really nice price for him. Should be very productive. Harrison, great for DFS also. Nice high floor. And then Dallas and Alioski, good fullback options for sure. Bamford's having a really good season. Nice upside for GPPs. Click, I believe, is still taking penalty kicks, but that would be something to check because I'm not 100% sure on that off the top of my head. And then Rodrigo, not a bad option either, but his floor is not as high playing centrally. And he has been subbed early a bit of late. To go down to Brighton. This is the projected lineup here. Percy Tau, I think, is only 3,500 at forward, which is kind of crazy. Let's see. Yeah, min price forward playing against a Leeds team that are not great in defense. That's actually really intriguing. I didn't think he was necessarily going to start again, but if he does, that's super interesting. And then I'd like to see who is in terms of set piece takers for Brighton. If this is the lineup, Trossard and March probably split. But if Pascal Gross gets a start, he could end up taking everything or maybe splitting with Solly March. He would probably start over Trossard. But either way, those are both great forward options, Gross and Trossard, whoever starts out of those two. Even if Maupay started over Tau, it's not crazy to think about using him at only 5,700. Maybe not the best play for cash or optimal because of his floor, but he has a ton of upside at that price. So I honestly could see taking two forwards, so filling both of your forward slots just from this early game. And another reason to think about doing that is there are some good forward options in these later matches, but the problem is we're not going to know what the lineups are, so there is some risk there if you wait to fill those spots, and you're going to need to be prepared to make pivots. All right, let's talk about the Burnley West Ham game. A little less exciting, 2.5 total. Sebastian Haller is gone from West Ham. He got transferred, but it looks like Michael Antonio is returning from injury, so that's a boost for West Ham. Burnley is a team that on the road is just going to sit deep, stay organized, and defend. So West Ham, the superior team here, should have more of the ball, more chances. Burnley will, try to take their chances on set pieces, which is kind of where they like to get their goals since they play so defensively. In terms of lineups, Burnley lineup, Dwight McNeil could return. He's only 6.5K. Not a bad floor play, but I do worry about the upside of Burnley in this game just because West Ham's going to have a lot more of the ball. And they're actually pretty solid on defense this year. West Ham, so like I said, Antonio should be returning to the starting lineup, which is big for them. The only thing is he's only made 2 substitute appearances, so I am a little worried about his minutes, but he's still a fine GPP play. In terms of set pieces for West Ham, you've got Cresswell and Bowen generally splitting. Because of the nature of this match with West Ham having a lot of the ball, I think Cresswell and Kufal will be productive, but they are the 2 highest priced fullbacks, so not sure that I really want to go there. And then again, Bowen, probably a little overpriced considering you can get, let's see where he is. So he's at 8.2K. Splitting set pieces, I probably rather just go down to a guy like Rafinha or even Trossard in that other match. And then Benrahma, he's actually been doing pretty well since coming up to the EPL from the Championship. So he's another option in there. I think his price, 6.3K, not bad. But again, I'd probably rather just have Trossard there because Burnley are a solid team defensively for the most part. All right, so Chelsea-Fulham. Chelsea is the biggest favorite on the slate. The one thing I will say is that Fulham are a much better team, or at least they look like a much better team than they were at the beginning of this year. And that's particularly true when it comes to defense. They've not allowed more than one goal in their last 5 matches, and they held Liverpool to a 1-1 draw, they held Spurs to a 1-1 draw, and they held Southampton to a 0-0 draw. So, past performance is not always going to, or past results are not always going to predict future performance, but I think it's pretty clear that Fulham are just much more solid defensively. So again, it's going to be a match where Chelsea will dominate the ball and chances, but I think they could have a tough time breaking through Fulham, the way Fulham has been playing of late. So as much as I want to play Chelsea players, the issue here is going to be that it's a late match and they have so much depth, it's just really hard to figure out who's going to start for them. And that goes from back to front. So Reece James is now healthy, or supposedly, so he might come back in, but that's not a guarantee. Chilwell should be there. I love both of them as fullback plays. And then Mason Mount is like the mainstay of the midfield. He should be in there. The only concern I have with Mount is that last match we saw both Chilwell and Ziyech cut into his set pieces. So if he's losing that monopoly role, he's a little less attractive, but nonetheless a good play in this matchup. Kovacic is pretty cheap. He's 3.6K, I think. Not a bad option. Excuse me. And then this front three is going to be really hard to predict. Fantasy Football Scout is generally pretty accurate. They're showing Ziyech, Abraham, and Pulisic. But this could just as easily be Hudson-Odoi, Giroud, and Werner for all we know. So that's the tricky part with Chelsea. If we're looking at those forwards, they feel I would like to play Hudson-Odoi probably the most. He has the highest floor of this group. So I suppose you could slot in Hudson-Odoi and then pivot to either Pulisic or Werner. That would be one option. But the thing I think is the most interesting on Chelsea is that Ziyech is down at 6.7K. So he's 1,200 less than Mount. Although even with a monopoly of set pieces for Mason Mount, I'd probably rather have Ziyech for 1,200 less, and his floor is just as high, and he probably has higher upside. So really like Ziyech. Again, little problem there is that we just don't know if Ziyech is going to start. So I think one solution, though, for that would be, if you look in the late match, James Ward-Prowse is another play I like that I'm going to talk about. So I think what you could do is you could slot in Ward-Prowse, and if you get to the Chelsea match and Ziyech is in, you could just play him over Ward-Prowse. But that's really just a matter of preference. I think Ward-Prowse, you would say, is a little safer because he has all of the set pieces for Southampton. He is going to play 90 minutes. Ziyech is kind of rounding into form now, could play less than 90 minutes. His role on set pieces is a little unclear. So there's a little more risk with Ziyech, but I think there's more upside there as well, just given the matchup and given his style of play. So that's just one way you can think about putting in Ziyech without having to worry about him not starting. And that's kind of how you have to think about your entire lineup on a slate that has multiple start times. Actually, same thing with Chelsea guys here. So if you want to play Chilwell or Reece James, there's some pretty good pivots. If they don't start, you've got James Justin for Leicester in the later match. And then under James, you have Timothy Castagni, however you say that. I think he will probably start for Leicester. So there are pivots there for the Chelsea guys. So overall, I could see having 3 or 4 Chelsea guys or 1 or 2. It just depends on how you want to build. There's the plays on this slate are so close, it's hard to differentiate them. So again, it's really a matter of preference. I think, ideally what you want to try to do is if 2 guys have a similar floor, you just want to pick the one that you believe has the higher upside and kind of go through your lineup like that. All right. As I mentioned, Fulham have been playing better, but Chelsea are really solid defensively. I don't think Fulham are going to do a ton. After Tottenham went up 1-0 on Fulham last match, typical Mourinho, they just sat back and let Fulham have the ball. It was a nightmare to watch. As a Spurs fan, it was like Groundhog Day because every time that's happened in a match, they've given up leads late. But the reason I bring that up is mainly because I think Lampard will have seen that, and I do not think that Chelsea are going to sit back even if they go up a goal. So I just think Chelsea are going to have a ton of the ball here. Fulham will get most of their chances on a few counters and some set pieces. So the one guy I think is a decent play from Fulham is actually Cavallero. He's taking pretty much all of their corners, and as long as Mitrovic is not on the field, then Cavallero is going to have PKs too. So while the matchup isn't great, I think 6K is a perfectly reasonable price for Cavallero. Again, I just think there's so many viable options here that you could take Trossard instead. You could take Maupay instead. You could take Ben Rama from West Ham instead. They're all very, very close plays. But Cavallero, pretty safe given the role on corners. And also some upside there because he does take PKs. All right, final match, Southampton and Leicester. This is probably the match that has the most talent between the 2 teams and the 2 teams that are the most evenly matched. But Leicester at home and Southampton are missing Danny Ings for this. He has COVID. So that's definitely a knock on the Southampton attack. And for that reason, I think I'm going to favor Leicester in this match. Of course, the nice thing with Leicester is that we know almost all of their production comes from 2 guys, Maddison and Vardy, who I think, they're the 2 most expensive players on the slate. But when you look at the full context here, Maddison at 9.1K is actually a really reasonable price for the type of production you get from this guy. Pretty much all their set pieces plus upside. As you can see, he's just always, every start you can see in the game log, he's in double digits. That's just what he does. So he's one of the easiest plays on the slate. He will be chalked, but that's fine. And then Vardy does have the highest implied scoring odds on the slate, but you're paying for it. So he's a fine play. There might be too much ownership there, so something to keep in mind for GPP. And then on the Southampton side, if you thought 9.1K was good for James Maddison, then I would say that 7.1K for Ward-Prowse is perhaps even better. Again, he's taken all the set pieces. Super floor is just a little bit lower, but he's got 8+ in 10 straight starts, so that's what he brings to the table. My slight concern with James Ward-Prowse is just that it's a tough matchup against Leicester, and they're missing Ings. So that's why I think it's worth considering a guy like Ziyech over him. But I'm fine playing either of them or even both of them. It's just a matter of having a pivot for Ziyech if he does not start. Ward-Prowse just always starts, so I'm really not concerned about him in that late match. So that covers all the games. This slate is really, really wide open. In every match, you kind of have the one clear favorite, and it makes it kind of easy to pick out the potential plays. There's a lot of high floor plays at pretty much every position. But, just to kind of run through it one more time, if we're looking at a cash optimal build, Hudson-Odoi would be a great play if he started. Rafinha is a good play, roll on set pieces. Pascal Gross would be great if he plays. Don't mind Rodrigo there. McNeil, high floor play if he starts. Trossard, roll on set pieces if he starts. Cavallero, roll on set pieces. And then could get Tau. Or yeah, there's Tau. 3.5K against a leaky Leeds defense. Don't mind going there. James Maddison, easiest play in the slate. Mason Mount, most set pieces for the biggest favorite on the slate. Harrison, high floor play in a decent matchup. Solly March, rolling set pieces against the leaky Fulham defense. JWP, all the set pieces for Southampton. Ziyech, great matchup if he starts there. So as you can see, there's just a plethora of high floor plays, which is like it's almost too many. We never get this. Cresswell and Kofal, they're fine. I just don't think we need to pay that much. So Chilwell, Justin, Dallas, Reece James, all perfectly good options there because of their floors. Alioski, 4.9K. Like him as well if he gets a start. So yeah, there's just a ton of high floor plays. So it's about putting together a roster of those guys that fit well together. But I think overall, that is the strategy for a cash optimal build. Just build out your high floor, and if there's two or three guys you're stuck between, just pick out the one that you think has the highest upside, just based on their matchup or their implied scoring odds, and then you've got your build. GPP, it's absolutely wide open. There's a million ways to go because honestly, all 8 teams on this slate could reasonably win their game, except maybe Fulham. But other than that, any team can win on this slate. So there's a million ways to go in GPP, and that means the goalkeeper position will probably be a mess. So I'm not even going to touch on that one. Play whoever you want there. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you found this helpful. This is going to be up pretty early, so if you have any questions or comments, drop them below or find me on Twitter. Moving forward, I will be doing more slate previews. So if you're new here, please do subscribe. I appreciate the support. Couple other things that will be on the channel. I will have updates on my bankroll challenge going from $10 to $10K. Probably stick with monthly videos on that, but I'm also providing updates on Twitter there. Then I'm also getting into soccer cards of late, and I'm going to start a weekly episode about that. So if that interests you, definitely subscribe as well. All right, guys. Good luck on the slate. Again, if you have any questions, just drop them below. Take care.